Okay, fabulous. What we're going to do is I'll begin now. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Let me take you over to my screen. Here we go. So we're going to kind of jump back into we'll do two different things today. First, we're going to continue on looking at the Sefirot, and we'll take a look at three more, which look into why or how Kabbalah explains why bad things happen to good people and why good things happen to bad people, in philosophy known as theodicy, or the problem of evil. So we're going to take a look at that. The next three Sefirot deal with that particular issue. What we'll then do is we'll take a deep dive into aspects of practical Kabbalah, right? How Kabbalists, and just one could argue just general Jewish folks, tend to kind of want to control, change nature and like the will of God by performing different acts. And that'll be kind of the second part. So please do reach out, say anything if you do have any questions. I've called today's session the divine plan, and we shall go from there. Okie doke, right. So let's have a look over here. Right. So the last three Sefirot. Oh, sorry, the last three. We have four more Sefirot to explore. We're going to look at these three at the beginning of today's session: Hod, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, and then Malchut will leave to the end. Next week, when we look at Malchut, we're going to start looking at the Kabbalistic approach to the future, the Kabbalistic approach to what the world is supposed to look like, dealing with issues such as the Messiah, end of days, world to come, resurrection of the dead, and how that links in to that final aspect of Malchut. What we'll deal with today are the building up to those three: Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. We have already begun, right, with the first three that looked what we would call planning. If we're talking about the realm of God, it's all about the idea of God laying the groundwork before he created the world, as is mentioned in Proverbs, that the entire Torah was rewritten, was a blueprint for the creation of the world. If we're looking at a human level, Chokhmah deals with the issue of insight, of inspiration, of subconscious. Binah really is that's the insight, that's the digesting, it's the using of that information and doing something with it. But all within the realm of the mind, all within the realm of planning, all within the realm of the conscious. Now, the next three, we said they dealt with action. Now, particularly, you could deal with, let's say, God's actions, like how God generally acts within the world, and this kind of balance between love and mercy, and justice and judgment, and fairness. And we see different examples of those in different cases in the Tanakh by use of the different names of Yud, He, Vav, He that denote mercy, or Elohim, which denote justice and judgment. And then all of those kind of come together and equal Tiferet, this balance between these two. And again, the way that we react, the way that we act in the world is also a balance between loving kindness and a balance between justice. And that we can't just pursue one, only. We need to have a balance between both, and that equals Tiferet, the combination of those two concepts. Now we're going to look at a kind of one which doesn't relate as much, right, to us as individuals, as human beings, but more to, as I said before, the path, the stages of which redemption comes about, the way in which the world will kind of come to this perfect state, as is explained in Kabbalah and hoped for by Jewish people. Now, you can see over here that Kabbalah teaches that there are certain questions that have come up for many, many millennia, right? One, which is found in the book of Eov, the book of Job, Job, why do the righteous suffer? And then also King David, why do the wicked prosper? And the answer to these is found in Netzach and Hod. These two aspects of the 10 Sfirot look to explain the issues that one would have when observing the universe and humanity. The issues one would have on a philosophical level as to how could it be that if God is merciful and if God is just, if he is both of those things, why isn't it obvious when I look at the world? Why is it that there is suffering in the world? Why is it that not only is there suffering, but why is it that people who we would think deserve to be punished seem to do well, and vice versa? Why is it that upstanding, good people, they seem to be the ones that always suffer? And the answer that we see, according to Kabbalah, is in Netzach, number one. That Netzach refers to God's actions that are kind. However, they begin with a prelude of harshness. Hod, on the other hand, specifically refers to the other type of event, which is that, yes, sometimes the wicked prosper, but that also is just a prelude to their end, to their end game, to the end result of them being punished. There is Netzach, not only can it mean victory, but also it can mean eternity. That at the end of the day, it will be the good people that will be rewarded and the wicked that will be destroyed. Now, on a personal level, maybe I'll throw it back at you in a moment. Me personally, I find difficult to kind of get my head around, right? If we look even at the path of history, sometimes if we would take a very narrow look at history, it's difficult even then to see how people who are evil, people who deserve to be punished, are not, and vice versa. When taking history in a broader view and a broader look, we can maybe see the hand of God. There's a really, really wonderful piece by Mark Twain, a very, very famous piece that he wrote in the 1891, in which he wrote about the anomaly of the Jewish people. It's a very, very famous piece, but I'll go just in case you haven't heard it before, or because we want to hear it again, where he writes that there must be a secret to the immortality of the Jewish people. What does he mean by that? He says that throughout history, they have been ruled and attempted to be conquered by essentially every huge world power that has ever existed to our knowledge in history, whether it's the Greeks or the Romans or the Babylonians or the Persians or the ancient Egyptians, who each, although had differences in terms of their culture, in terms of their contributions to the world, the one thing they had in common, Persians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, was to destroy Judaism, destroy the Jewish people. And what was the other thing they had in common? Every single one of them failed. What does it mean by they failed? The Jewish people are still here, yet the ancient Greek empires, the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, ancient Egyptian Empire are just dust. They don't exist anymore, yet the Jewish people still exist. And not only do the Jewish people exist, they prosper. They make 0.1% of the entire world population, yet are contributors in every field that we could ever think of, whether it's science or mathematics or art or literature or music. The Jewish people seem to be able to make a noise much louder than their mass, much louder, much brighter than their numbers. But at the same time of being persecuted throughout history. And again, he's writing this right before World War II, before the rise of communism. And the Jewish people have also survived Nazism, also survived Stalinism, right? That those two world powers also looked to destroy Judaism, destroy the Jewish people, yet we are here. And you take a look and see how from dust and ashes and bones, the Jewish people rose up from the flames of the Holocaust, to return to their homeland after 2,000 years. And Mark Twain writes, well, what's the secret to the immortality of the Jew? And that's how he ends his article. What's the secret to immortality? Question mark, that's it. Now, from a theistic point of view, or at least a Kabbalistic point of view, the answer is Netzach and Hod. What is the secret to the Jewish people's ability to survive, but not only survive, but to thrive? It's the fact that within the makeup of history as implanted by God within the 10 Sefirot is this aspect that whatever may be happening around us, that even though there have been many, many dark moments throughout our history, it has been our ability to rise up and survive. Netzach Yisrael, the Jewish people are called, the victorious, the eternal Jewish people. Same too, Hod, that splendor, that majesty reveals itself when taking a broader look at history. Now, when these two aspects come together, when Netzach and Hod, okay, Netzach, again, just to clarify, Netzach is the ability for God to show that good people are rewarded eventually. And Hod is the opposite. Hod is eventually wicked people are punished, right? When those two pieces come together, Yesod, connecting heaven and earth, the idea being is that it's the realization of God's active involvement in the world. So if you remember way back when we were talking about Ein Sof, we were talking about Keter, we were talking about a spiritual essence which didn't really have any connection to us in this world. It was this ethereal, infinite being that maybe we could try and be cognizant about, we could maybe meditate on, but that was basically it, right? That was it. Now, when we get to Yesod, we're talking about a omnibenevolent, an all-good, a kind, immanent God that is involved in our everyday life, but not in our everyday life, but every single thing that goes on in the universe. Now, as a counter-argument to that, which we can discuss if you wish later on, we'll leave some time at the end and again continue on discussions afterwards, it's still very difficult to see. It's still in the minutiae of the lives that we live and the suffering that we see in the world on an individualistic level, it's difficult to see how that majesty and that reward like manifests itself. If you talk about the suffering of, for example, children, right, in different parts of the world, how are they liable? How are they able to see their reward at the end of the tunnel? And just as a kind of a side point, and again, this is not my viewpoint, but it's why you do see sometimes, maybe in news articles or whatever, other different places. I'll give an example, actually, one that came out today, of certain individuals who either practice Kabbalah, who study Kabbalah, who will use the suffering of others as a way to say they've done something wrong and they are being punished, even if it's not necessarily obvious. Okay, now what I'm about to say now is not just to clarify, not my opinion. This came out today, actually, an MK, a member of Knesset, he's a religious individual, studies Kabbalah, and he said, quote, that the reason why certain women suffer from breast cancer and have miscarriages is because they are being punished for dressing immodestly. See other examples, that during the Lebanon War, a Sephardic rabbi came out, also someone who was kind of heavily involved in the study of Kabbalah, and said the individual soldiers who were dying in the Second Lebanon War were dying because they didn't keep Shabbat properly. Another example, I'll give one more example. This was during Tzuk Eitan, I believe, during the war in Gaza in 2014. another Sephardic rabbi came forward and said that the reason why soldiers were dying was as a punishment, a general punishment for the Jewish people because of the sin of homosexuality. Now, again, just to clarify, these are not my opinions, but you can see how, with, I'm not saying with a certain, by taking a certain path in the study of Kabbalah and wanting to give reason and connect everything on a micro level, an individualistic level, can sometimes lead individuals to make those statements and to make those assumptions without any real evidence or any real knowledge. They're not prophets, not speaking to God. They have no idea. It's a way for them to voice their viewpoint, whether it's being being homophobic, an opinion on you trying to convince the Jewish people to keep Shabbat in a very weird and aggressive way, or in this case, which came out, this article came out today of the women who dress immodestly, of trying to kind of push forward an agenda and making people feel kind of bad, making people feel bad about it. But it's using these concepts of Netzach and Hod, in my opinion, in a not in an incorrect way, in an ignorant way, right? We don't know. That's the fact. That's the truth. Now we're going to kind of transition now into this aspect I mentioned before of practical Kabbalah, because this place with Yesod, the concept here is that this is the point at which we as individuals are able to connect to God and almost affect change in the universe, or affect change in our own personal existence at this point in Yesod. That on the left here with Hod and on the right here is Netzach, that's God involving himself in the world, either punishing people or rewarding people. And Yesod, this concept of Yesod, foundation, is the point of entry. The point of entry for us to be able to create change, to affect our destiny. Now, there's a graphic here, right, that gives you just like a cute piece on kind of the other, the other names of and representations of Yesod within Kabbalah. One that's not mentioned here, which if you were to do like your own reading, it probably will come up, which is that you may have seen different diagrams that depict the 10 Sefirot on a human body. That if we look that the top here is the head, and this is the left arm, the right arm, and this is the left leg and the right leg. And Yesod has a direct connection to the concept of sex and sexuality. And there are many, many places within the Zohar, within Sefer HaBahir, and other places, the concept of Yesod is referred to as almost not only sex and sexuality, but also like the sexual organ, whether it's a penis or whether it's a vagina. Now, interestingly enough, and again, this is like depending on like the age group you're teaching to, you wouldn't necessarily go down this road, but we're all adults here. And this is, for me, it's an interesting aspect which you don't necessarily hear that often, that Kabbalah is all encompassing, right? It doesn't just focus on spirituality. It doesn't just focus on physicality. It doesn't just focus on, it focuses on all realms of existence that we know. And so when we're talking about Yesod, I'm saying here that this is like the entry point in the way that we are able to affect change and to create and like to affect change within like our metaphysical existence. The same thing, that's the reason why it's compared to the Zohar in terms of sex. That for a human being, on a number of different levels, first of all, the ultimate way to show love and affection to another individual is through sex. But beyond that, the sexual act as it relates to the creation of another human life is also the closest thing that a human being can come to in terms of, almost becoming like God, the ability to create life. And so I won't go into, I mean, that's just like a very, very brief sentence. I can answer more questions or give you more readings in terms of this, but that is an interesting point that that when if we take a step back and look at our potential as humans, and you look at a life that you have created with your partner, there is something there which is indescribable, that is incredibly spiritual and emotional, that connects you to a much deeper level in terms of your understanding of how the universe works. Both, and not only that in terms of creation of a life, but also when you're also to have sex with your partner, again, that coming together creates a connection unlike anything else. Now, the way, and a number of different places in the Torah, the Jewish people and the relationship between Jewish people and God is also placed in the same realm, in the same plane as a relationship between two lovers, particularly within the book of Shir HaShirim. We see it in a number of different places and poems from like the 12th and 13th century too, of how the Jewish people are seeking a connection. They're kind of trying to reconnect with their lost lover. Written by King Solomon. On the face of it, the book is just a love story. Read into it, people kind of attribute the female in the story as the Jewish people, the male in the story is God. The Torah is this marriage contract between them. And there's this kind of ongoing, everlasting, never-ending love story between the two. And the way that we as Jewish people are able to kind of show our love and affection, but not only love and affection, but affect change, is by performing various different mitzvot. And on a kind of a very, very basic level, when we talk about practical Kabbalah, although it can seem quite kind of anticlimactic, the main way Kabbalists looked to affect spiritual change and change destiny and to affect the actions of God was by performing clear mitzvot that are mentioned within the Torah, particularly, specifically, mitzvot that involved physical objects. That in a sentence, practical Kabbalah / performance of mitzvot is taking a physical object, any physical object, and imbuing it with purpose and a spiritual meaning. And we see that in very different places throughout the year, whether it's taking just water and dough, mixing it together, cooking it for 18 minutes and eating matzah. Matzah then has this like hugely important spiritual level to it that you would be hard pressed to you'd be surprised at just coming from water and flour, two incredibly basic materials that we find within our world. Same thing too with tefillin, which is made just from animal hide, from leather. The ink itself is also made from natural materials, but the careful construction of this piece, again, becomes this hugely spiritual object that allows one to connect to God. There are other aspects too, and we'll get into a moment when we talk about prayer, we talk about the shofar. But in a sentence, taking the physical world and giving it a spiritual purpose. That is practical Kabbalah. Again, using our voice. The idea that we are able to construct thoughts within our mind, that these electrical impulses in our head move around, they cause something that's just in the back of our throats to vibrate. That makes a sound. Other individuals are able to then interpret that sound and imbue it with meaning. Even individuals who are much smarter than me and speak multiple languages, and I'm just some bozo here speaking in English, but I'm speaking to people who speak multiple languages. You're still able to understand me. Perhaps you translate it into a different language into your head. Perhaps your English is better than mine and you're able just to understand it fluently. But that too with the concept of prayer, that the intention that swims around in your mind, that then causes your vocal cords to vibrate. The words then come out of your mouth is also a pure example of taking just a physical piece, a physical noise, the vibration of air particles, and turning it into something spiritual. The ultimate example of this, of us trying to connect to God, is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when we try our best just for one day to remove as many physical barriers and boundaries as possible. That's why, not only on an equal level, we don't eat, we don't drink, we're not supposed to wear we're supposed to kind of limit the comfort of the clothes that we wear, so that's why we don't wear leather shoes. But also on an equal level, you're not that for 25 hours, you're not allowed to have sex on Yom Kippur either. You're trying, at least for those 25 hours, to live a purely spiritual existence as much as you can. The rest of the year is about taking that physicality and doing something with it. Now I'm going to we're going to pivot slightly because this all kind of connects. I apologize that this is kind of a move away from the 10 sefirot into another number, but it is important. It is important. That not only are there 10 sefirot, there are 10 ways that God manifests himself within the world. There are 10 ways with which we can view ourselves and use every single ounce of our being to connect to God. Not only does that exist, but according to Kabbalah, there are also 4 worlds that are layered on top of one another. Now, again, I'm not a scientist, but whether you want to view that as, let's say, 4 alternative realities or 4 different dimensions, or if you want to view it as kind of again, I'm sorry to quote the Matrix, but whatever. There are different kind of existences that we are aware of, similar-ish to the Matrix. I apologize again, but it's interesting, like the Matrix, because it's also inspired by Kabbalah. Well, I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to stop saying the Matrix. Okay, I'll stop saying it now. But there are 4 different worlds, and again, when we introduce this, and this will kind of then lead us into these aspects of more examples of practical Kabbalah. Now, there are 4 different worlds. The first is the physical world that we live in, which is called Asiya. And we'll get to the moment, but here you'll see on the chart here at the bottom, the Asiya. It's the world that we can see, we can feel, we can touch. That in itself, according to this text by the Ramchal, by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Italian rabbi, 18th century, 17th, 18th century, he kind of led the Kabbalistic Renaissance for Ashkenazi Jews. And he writes that in the physical world, you have the terrestrial and the celestial. You have like the universe, the physical universe, which we can observe as much as we can, as best as possible, and the terrestrial, the earth, the world that we live in. That's world number 1. You then have world number 2, which is the realm, it's called Yetzirah. It's the realm of the angels, a realm that is very close to ours. The number 1, angels are able to interact on our plane, and in some cases, we are able to interact with that on that plane. It takes more than just being conscious, but that exists. The third realm, the third world, which is called Bria, is he calls it that of the highest forces, or it's called the world of the throne, is a connector, almost a bridge between God and the other worlds. It's called Bria, the creative world, because it allows an infinite, non-physical, transcendent God to interact with us. Think of it, again, if anyone's in computers, I hope this helps. Even not, I think it should help. Think of it like Bria is like the operating system. It's like the iOS or the Windows of the spiritual world. that you, if I was sitting here with my computer, I would have no way of interacting interacting with the hardware of my computer. In this scenario, I am God, hello, and the hardware is the world. I would have no way of interacting. I need a bridge. I need some kind of interface to be able to interact between one and the other. And that we call an operating system. And Bria is kind of the operating system of the spiritual, of this Kabbalistic interpretation of the four worlds. It's the original iOS, it's the original Windows, it's the operating system, kind of a two-way operating system. That God can interact with us and we can interact with God. And then finally, the Atzilut. Atzilut is this, that's where God is. If that, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, but that's the realm of God, the world of God. And the way in which a Kabbalist would begin to kind of try and affect change is by climbing through these worlds as high as possible. The higher you can get, the more you can do. And here's like a nice little chart that kind of takes a look at each one. Again, each one is also mapped to one of the four letters of the name of God, Yud, He, Vav, He. The we are in the Asiyah, the He, this is our existence. The Vav, Yitzirah, the formation, is the kind of this realm above where angels exist. Where, if I mentioned last time, when the soul, when you die, the soul instantly rises to Yitzirah. It's like here in the world, but just slightly removed. Bria is that connector, that operating system between God and the rest of the world. And Atzilut, here at the top, that's the realm of God. Asiyah, Zirah, Bria, and Atzilut. Now, to gain understanding of the nature of these worlds, we should have a look at one of the most practical Kabbalistic concepts, which is prayer and meditation. The foremost ways in which a Kabbalist will try and influence and affect the world is through prayer and meditation. Now, again, I'm not sure if you're kind of literacy in terms of Jewish prayer, so I won't go into too much details. Again, I'll go into more detail for those that are interested. But the formation of Jewish prayer, the order in which the Siddur was constructed, is directly linked to this concept of the four worlds. When a Jew prays, according to like the classical traditional Siddur, the traditional prayer, it relates directly to the climbing of these four realms. And if done properly, according to Kabbalah, one is able to climb through these realms. There are things that are needed, and we'll go through that in a minute, but you climb through those realms. Very, very briefly, the first parts of prayer deal with the physical world. It's all about our existence. It's all about us, our bodies, being thankful that we can wake up and we can go to the bathroom, we can stand up straight, and that we are free, and that we have clothes and we can hear. It's all to do with our physical existence. So the very first blessings is about praising the world that we can see. It's about looking at the wonders of nature, right? That's the first aspect, the asiyah. Then we move into the next stage, which begins to talk about the more spiritual aspects of the world as they exist beyond our physical. The next is a preparation. It's a way in which we begin to consider God within our world. We begin to praise and consider what the concept of God is, finally ending off with the Amidah, the silent prayer. The silent prayer being the most impactful and formative prayer that we have within Judaism. There are two main prayers that we say. This is important. Let me see if I have the right piece. I'll just say it anyway. Oh, here we go. Yeah, we have two prayers in Judaism. The first is the Shema. The Shema, where we declare, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, we declare our monotheistic beliefs, we declare that we are all united. The Shema, in essence, though, is God speaking to us, and how us in the individual world are able to, how we should behave. And it's going to say those first two worlds. We exist in this physical world, and our actions have consequences, that if we do good, then we will be rewarded, and if we do bad, we will be punished. But the Shema is God speaking to us. The Amidah is us speaking to God. The Amidah is those second two pieces. It's those last two worlds. It's Bria and Atzilut. The formation of the silent Amidah, in essence, a meditation, is a way in which we are able to demand of God an improvement in our existence, an improvement in our lives, whether it is to heal the sick, whether it is for wisdom and understanding, whether it is for world peace, whether it is for the coming of the Mashiach. Each one of those prayers is an opportunity for us to affect change. And so, although prayer is very much part of normative Judaism, and for any of us who have been to a synagogue before, it's like standard, like Jews pray. Prayer itself is actually one of the foremost Kabbalistic practices. And there are pieces on top which add on to that add on to the Kabbalistic aspects of it. So let me give you some examples. Hold on a second, let me see. Do we need to have a look at this? No, it's all right, I won't do that. Let me explain what I mean. So for example, there are individuals, and you may have seen this before, may have not, but there are individuals who before they pray, they make sure to tie a belt around themselves. It's called a gartel. Okay, you might have seen like Chabad or Hasidic rabbis wear it before. That is a very much a Kabbalistic practice that is looking to separate out the different aspects of the Sefirot, to separate out the more spiritual aspects, the lower half, and the more physical aspects, the upper half. So they tie around this belt around themselves. Number two, Kabbalists will usually meditate around an hour or so before they begin saying the Amidah. Different forms of meditation. There are specific Kabbalistic mantras and forms of meditation which one can use and do before you pray, or just as generally as a way to meditate. I actually sent out a book at the beginning of the week. For anyone who's interested to take a peek, there's a free PDF version online which you can take a look at, which explores some of those pieces. Another aspect is the way the types of iconography that one has around the house or within a synagogue. Okay, so we're talking about mezuzot, we're talking about chamsas, the one places within the house. If you're talking about the red string that individuals buy for when they go to Israel, each of those has its own particular aspect that looks to remove the evil eye, negativity, from this place, so that prayer can be said in a pure way. To delve into the red string just very, very briefly. Again, I'm not saying that every single piece of red string that one buys, this is what's happened to it, but it goes as follows. The concept is that a long red thread is taken to the cave of Rachel, Rachel's tomb, and wrapped around, kind of bound around it 7 times. The reason for that is as follows. Number one, Rachel, not only in the text in Genesis, but also is referred to later on in Ezekiel, that her prayers specifically are the ones that are going to beseech and save the Jewish people. And by evoking her name, by evoking Rachel, we are able to then create a stronger connection to God. a red string is wrapped around her grave 7 times. The reason for 7 times is because according to the Zohar, God circled around what was going to be the earth 7 times before it was created. And by doing so, set the tone for this series of 7s that we see already within the world, whether it's a 7-day week leading up to Shabbat. And taking that red thread, Adom, there's a few different interpretations as to why it's Adom. The most popular, the one I liked the best, was to do with the Para Aduma, the red heifer, which was this cow that used to exist in temple times. It doesn't exist anymore, but it's a symbol of God's mastery over nature, that this red cow exists and that we are able to perform certain rituals with it. There are other aspects too that relate to King David, Aaron, so get into those now. By taking that string, you're evoking those aspects before you engage in prayer. There's another one over here of our ability to kind of change the course of nature, or God's control over nature, which is found in the Malbim, which is this: that man's physical components are to man what natural law is to the universe, while the soul is to man what God's supernatural metaphysical guidance is to the universe. God has made the function of the universe at large contingent upon human beings vis-a-vis their own personal universe, meaning that when we assert our free will, if we are able to move away from our physical desires and in favor of spiritual choices, that is when God will return likewise spiritual rewards. And that's where we come back to this concept of taking the physical and making it spiritual. Okay, you can take a piece of food and you can just stuff your face. Or you could take a moment, you could take 10, 15 seconds and meditate and concentrate on how lucky you are to have this piece of food and where it comes from by saying a bracha. Another example, that I'll go back to the issue of sex. Sex has the ability to be the most kind of animalistic act, but also the most spiritual act. Viewed in Judaism, that by having sex with someone who you love, who you commit to for the rest of your life, is a way of taking, again, a physical desire and giving it a spiritual purpose. And according to the Malbim, that is the way of showing God, and then God returns in like, that you want to kind of attain a higher level of spirituality. Again, we look at waste. We look at the concept of tzedakah, of money. We could just obsess of making as much money as possible. By taking our earnings and giving 10%, is another way in which we are able to show to God we want to take our physical objects and give them a higher meaning. Another piece, I won't go through, you can read these in your own time, but I'll give you maybe one or two more. There's another one, again, the idea of like your actions have powerful and effective, are effective to the higher worlds and has repercussions there in the different four worlds. Another piece, concept of kavanah. The concept of kavanah, of intention, is another piece where we come to where Kabbalists would sit and meditate before doing any mitzvah. Again, whether it's just eating an apple, eating a piece of fruit, you may have witnessed or noticed an individual who will sit and close their eyes and close them tightly and say that blessing before they eat that piece of fruit. Particularly today, it kind of makes, I think it makes more sense than it has done, let's say, even in the last 15 and 20 years. But when we want to try and be kind of conscious of where we are getting our food from, that's not a weird concept anymore. We want to know that For example, particularly if you are a vegan, or even if you're not, but you still care very much about the treatment of animals, or even on the impact on the climate of your own diet, whatever that may be, you want to be very, very careful of the where your food is sourced, what's in it, even from a health perspective. And so there is like a gap, right, of an individual looking and reading the ingredients of a packet, or looking at the ethics and morals of a particular food processing company, and saying a blessing, saying a bracha. That when we say, for example, borei peri ha'adama, on a vegetable, it's just taking those few seconds at least of intention to be appreciative that this thing can grow out of the ground, and I'm able to eat it, and then it gives me this energy, and it makes me healthy, whatever. I won't push the point too much, but you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. I hope you do anyway. Another really, really interesting piece here, and this is where I'll end off, and then maybe I'll give some time for questions if anyone has. Or some focus on any other points that want me to kind of go into a bit deeper. I'll go over everything as well. But when looking at the 4 different worlds, that if we want to affect change, according to the Zohar, the first perfection is self-fulfillment. We have to not only for as individuals affect ourselves, but we need to fix the issues that exist in our physical world today on Earth before we can even move on to anything else. Next, the second is the perfection of this world. Those 2 things together. The third is the perfection of the upper world and all its heavenly hosts. And the fourth is the perfection of the divine name. Now, again, the Zohar, this is being written right in depending on what opinion we follow, but let's say it was even written 600 years ago. Let's say it was written 1900 years ago. Now it's become kind of this corny and cheesy phrase, right? That you've got to start off with yourself. Starts with the man in the mirror. The Zohar says it first. The first perfection is self-fulfillment. Before you go out into the world and think you're going to create effective change, you need to take a look at yourself and realize that on a basic level, who are you? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? There is a lot to be said and to be discussed that perhaps the first and the second can run in tandem, but we can perfect ourselves, and we still need to go out and make change within the world, and by making a change in the world, that also makes us better people, fine. But those 2 pieces need to be completed before we can even begin to think of making any spiritual impact on the 3rd world and then the 4th world. On this idea of spirituality. It all starts here within the physical world. And so again, we're talking about practical Kabbalah. Yes, there are pieces of meditation. We're talking about, if you want to talk about unity, yes, there are aspects of red strings, of Masa, of saying the 72 letter name of God, of aspects of meditation and of prayer. But if we look at the Zohar on a practical level, it basically means being a better person. By being a better person and then trying to create change within the world, that's then how you affect these other spiritual realms. Let me just quickly go through, and I just want to track just to show you where we started off and where we ended up, and then if there are any questions or anything like that, I'd be very, very happy to discuss with any of you. We looked at these 3 aspects of the Sefirot, Netzach and Hod. Netzach and Hod revolve around God's involvement in the world, specifically with rewarding the good and punishing the wicked, which sometimes is difficult to see because of our realities of evil sometimes succeeding and the good not necessarily getting what they deserve. But there is an aspect there, if we take a look at history wholesale, we can perhaps see that taking place. Next, we said is Yesod. Yesod is that entry point. the entry point for us to create change, to create real change within the spiritual realms, that then in turn creates change within the physical world. In order for us to understand what that means, there are actually 4 different worlds. There are 4 different worlds that exist. Some we can see, some we can maybe perhaps feel, and some are ways for us, for God to interact with us, and if we're on a high enough level, for us to interact with God. We'd like to explain those 4 different worlds: Asiyah, action; Yitzirah, formation; Bria, creation; Atzilut, emanation. Asiyah is the world that we can see. Yitzirah is sometimes that kind of that spiritual realm that we can connect to, sometimes through meditation, sometimes through prayer. Bria, I explained in a very kind of dry, boring, but I hope clear way of operating system, of a way for us to kind of begin to understand God and God to interact with us. And then Atzilut, that's the realm of God. We see Kabbalah, practical Kabbalah, best in prayer and preparation in prayer. The book I sent on the WhatsApp group the other day is a really wonderful way to explore that. We then also looked at different mitzvot and ways that we were able to kind of affect change by performing these mitzvot, whatever that may be. A piece of advice, depending on again, religious observance, whatever, but there's a lot to be said, not only on a religious level, but a psychological level, on the positive aspects of habits, and having habits which allow us to be conscious of time and being present, or of being grateful of what we have, or of understanding where our food comes from or our clothes come from. We have a tradition that allows us to do that, whether it's brachot, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's prayer. All of these institutions are just habits or suggested habits to allow us to kind of interact interact with the world in a more effective and meaningful way. And finally, we took this piece in the Zohar, which is, okay, to ascend those realms, we need to first start off with ourselves. It's corny, but maybe it's corny because it's true. The second is then to perfect the world around us, tikkun olam. And then, only then, are we then ready and able to enter these other realms. What we'll do is next time is we'll look to the future. We'll look at Kabbalistic concepts of the Messiah, what Judaism teaches about the Mashiach, about the end of days, about the resurrection of the dead, about other aspects that relate to what does the future look like according to Kabbalah, and can we even predict the future? Thank you for all those for bearing with me. I hope you got something from today. Any questions at all from anyone? Yes, Ella.
Can you go to the last sheet?
Absolutely.
The last sheet of the presentation.
Absolutely.
Okay, what is the difference between the upper world and the divine name?
Okay, so the upper
between the third and the fourth world.
Okay, so the third world and the fourth world. So the third world, the upper world, is the space, the space created for a non-physical, transcendent God to be able to interact with us. The fourth world, that's where God exists. That's
okay, I understand. Yeah.
That's what I kind of meant by the operating system. It's the bridge between the physical world and the spiritual world.
Okay, thanks. I understand.
Amazing. Okay, wonderful. Have an amazing rest of the week, everyone. It's lovely to see your names / your faces. And I will see you for our last session, hopefully next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.